So, welcome back. This is going to be the story of the Big Blue Quilt, my very first quilt, also quilt number 11, because it's the first quilt that I ever started, but it was about the 11th quilt I finally finished. As you can see, it is in very bad shape. It has been used to death. The blocks are, this is called a double friendship knot, and I'll get into some details with that in a minute. But the blocks are all wonky. You can see looking down the line how not straight it is. I think if I remember right, when I put this quilt together, I had a variation of up to an inch or more in my block sizes. So again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So anyway, this is the Big Blue Quilt. It has these blocks. I have the fabric for the sashing in between it, and it's really hard to see, but I actually have a spiral binding. It goes from the light blue to the little butterflies and back to the light blue. And we'll talk about that more in a minute too. Okay, so I'm going to give you some information about the Big Blue Quilt. So it is Double Friendship Knot is the name of the pattern. This was a Laura Wheeler design back from 1940, according to the magazine page that I have. And I found this quilt in a quilt magazine that my mom had called Stitch and Sew Quilts. This is the January-February 1984 edition. And right now all I have is photocopies. There's the block. And here's the pattern pieces and the layout. All the instructions. That's it for the instructions, by the way. At some point I had the original magazine still. I think I still do, probably in some memorabilia stuff, but I had the photocopies for the pattern. The block is supposed to be a 14-inch block. Now, this, as I mentioned, was the first quilt I ever started. There are many things that people will tell you that are helpful hints for people that are starting to quilt. So I'm going to go through some of those and show you why this is probably one of the worst quilts ever for starting. So it is recommended to start with a quilt with a block that doesn't have very many pieces in it. This block has 44 pieces per block. They tell you you should choose simple shapes such as squares or rectangles, not just diamonds and other shaped diamonds and parallelograms and kite-shaped pieces, all of which have bias edges that can stretch, and they did over time. You should try to make sure you have a quilt block that doesn't have very many matching points. Matching points can be tricky, and there are a lot in here that are supposed to match. Most of them don't, by the way. The ones that do, I think it's accidental. And simple piecing, especially no Y seams. Y seams scare a lot of people. Even people that have been quilting for years will refuse to do them. They're not hard, but they're fiddly. And this block has, I think, 28 Y seams per block, if I counted right. And they also recommend you do a small project. This quilt ended up being 92 inches by 105, where it currently sits. I don't remember what it was originally supposed to be because it did kind of morph over the years. But when I started out, I was in my mid to late teens, and I was excited about the idea. I'd always heard about girls, pioneer days, that they would make a quilt and that would go in their hope chest, and then they would have that for when they got married. And I thought, I would love to make a quilt for my future self and or my husband. And so I wanted to do this quilt. And I saw that pattern and I fell in love with it. And so my mom took me down to our local Fred Meyer's, which is now owned by Kroger. And they used to have a pretty good fabric selection. They had a whole section of the store that was fabric and patterns and that sort of stuff. And so we picked out this fabric, and I actually have some of the original fabric, so I thought I would show you so you can see how faded this has gotten over the years. So this is my original fabric. Isn't that pretty? So we got this fabric and we cut out the pieces. We used paper templates pinned on there and then cut them out 6 layers at a time with my mom's scissors and then paper clipped the pieces together. You can see it's the original paper clip. They're still there. This one too, you can see the little rusty spots from it. You can see the edges, how they're all fraying just from being moved around so much over the years. Anyway, the plan was I was going to hand stitch it because, you know, pioneer days. And I started. I don't think I actually finished a single block. I think I got about 3/4 of the way through, and I might have finished one. My mom decided she would help me as long as I was sewing. She was sewing too. She managed to get, well, at least 6 blocks done. I did explore and I found, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but there's hand stitching. And I found 6 blocks that are hand stitched together. So I suspect those are all ones that my mom did. At the most, I did 1 block. I got bored really quick and I stopped working on it. My mom continued for a little while and finally said, if you're not gonna work on it, I'm not gonna work on it. So it just got put in a box and shoved aside. Eventually I graduated from high school, I got married, and after I got married, I had a sewing machine that a friend had given me and I didn't have anything else to do. I didn't have any friends, I didn't know anybody, my husband was at work a lot, so I decided I was gonna sew. I sewed a dress for my baby when she was coming home from the hospital and I pulled out my project and started working on it. Now again, I mentioned I didn't know anything about Y-seams. I didn't know how to put them together the correct way. And this project is not what taught me how to do it either. I would just come up to a seam and fold over and pivot and just keep going because I didn't know what else to do. I know that 1/4" seams were important. I didn't know how to check for a 1/4" seam. I just assumed that the edge of my presser foot was a 1/4", so that's what I used. So most of these blocks are variable in size. Variable is a good word. Quite variable between my uneven stitching, my not knowing how to put the Y-seams together correctly and there being so many of them, and then also with all these edges being bias, I didn't know that I had to be careful not to stretch them, and so things got stretched out. But again, I would work on it for a little while. I'd get frustrated because I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't really like how it was coming out because I knew it wasn't looking like it was supposed to, and I'd get frustrated and put it away for a while. Then I would get bored or I would need something else to do. I'd pull it out, I'd work on it a little bit, and put it away. And that just kind of continued for a while. Eventually, when my husband was in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait for Desert Storm, I decided it's time to get this quilt finished. I'm gonna get it finished, I'm gonna put it on my bed. And the one thing I thought was nice was we had a queen size bed. I had originally planned to make a king size, so that meant I didn't need as many blocks. I think originally I was planning 56 blocks, which is probably why I have leftover fabric actually. So I started trying to put the blocks together. I realized quickly, having done a few quilts now by this point, my blocks were not going to go together side by side. There was no way. There was so much difference in the size. I figured I needed to do a sashing just to be able to try to manage to wrangle these things together into one quilt. So I found this fabric, which is extremely faded. This was actually quite dark. It was really interesting trying to find fabric from the 80s, now that we're into the middle 90s, or no, early 90s. Anyway, trying to find the fabric was a real pain. Found this one, figured it would work. So I started putting the sashing together and I got the quilt top done. I was so excited that I had finally finished that and I couldn't wait until my husband came home and I was gonna be able to show him what I had done while he was gone. And he came home and one of the first things he said was, I think we should get a king size bed. And I pretty much cried. So I showed him my quilt, which was queen size, and then I folded it up in a box and put it away because I thought, there's no point in making a queen size if we're gonna have a king size bed, because it's supposed to go in our bed. And I didn't have any heart to work on it. So it went away for quite a while. And then I decided, okay, now it's time to finish it. I pulled out the blocks that hadn't been done yet, or that had been done and put aside. I think that I might have had a couple blocks that I still had to put together. By then I had learned how to do Y seams, so there are a couple blocks that are probably done correctly, but it would be very few. And then I managed to get the quilt together and make it king size. My husband did want it super poofy. He wanted nice and thick and warm. So I bought a extra thick batting. Might have used 2 layers. I think it was just 1 layer, but it was extra thick. And so I knew there was no way I could quilt it, because I did hand quilting, because back then that's pretty much what anybody did. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to quilt through that. I mean, it was super thick. So I actually just tied this, which took a lot longer than you would think, just because it was so massive. Then I had to do the binding. I didn't have enough of, well, I had some of this fabric. I'm sure there's not enough of it in the first place. And even if there had been, I don't know if I knew that I had this at that point. I had used up all of the sashing fabric, so I didn't have any of that. Oh, I did know I had this, of course, because I did use it for the binding. I decided I hated this quilt by this time. I just wanted it done. I didn't like it. I wanted to throw it away. Keith loved it, and he did not want me to throw it away. So I thought I need to do something to redeem it. And so I had seen in a book, I had the Quilter's Complete Guide by Fons and Porter, and it showed how to do spiral binding. And I thought that was intriguing. And so I thought, that'll be fun. That'll be something different. Let's do that. And so I actually made spiral binding, which I have a little section of still. So you can see, again, it has the light and then the butterflies, and it just goes on and on. And so I did put spiral binding on the quilt. By the time I was done putting the spiral binding on, is the only thing I liked about the quilt. But I got it done, and we had it on our bed. We had it on our bed for years. I finally got something else that I could put on my bed because I hated looking at it. And so then we used it for camping. It would go on our camp bed, or we would put it on the ground if we were at the beach or somewhere. Anyway, it got lots and lots of use. When we were reconstructing our house and living in a tent, which is a whole different story, this was on our bed. So all the construction dust and all of us dirty and yucky laying on the bed, it's that kind of finished off the quilt. It was already in bad shape, and that kind of was the end of it. So where does this leave me now? Other than telling you this is not a good quilt to make for your first quilt, probably not even for your 11th, which, by the way, I think I mentioned. I had finished, I think, 10 quilts between this one starting and getting it done. But I did, so this is quilt number 1 and quilt number 11. I don't want to throw it out completely. I mean, it is in rags, but I'm thinking about cutting and saving one block, maybe as many as 4, and put them together to make a little wall hanging or something, maybe a pillow, I don't know. But I want to do something to save a little bit of it. I figured I have some of the original fabric, which I can use for the back or for pillow form or whatever. So that is what I'm going to do with this, or what I'm thinking about doing. Now, I'm kind of a perfectionist anyway. It bothered me that I didn't know how to do this quilt when I put it together. I was happy that I got it done, but I still think the pattern's a really pretty pattern. And so at one point I thought, someday I want to remake this block, not the whole great big huge quilt, but someday I want to remake this and make it look like it's supposed to. So that leads me to the next saga of this. In the late 90s, the quilt group that I did things with, we did a lot of group quilts and so on. We decided we were going to do a challenge quilt. And so the idea was, we went to the quilt store and we said, hey, would you pick out a fabric for our group? We need, I don't remember if it was half a yard or a yard for each person. And we had to make a quilt using a certain amount of that fabric. I think we had to use at least half of it. So this is the fabric that we had, this floral, for our challenge quilt, which my brother and I both thought looked like my grandmother's curtains in her basement. Don't know if it was or not. And I then decided, because I didn't know what to do with that fabric, I thought, this is the time. This is my chance. It's a challenge fabric. It's supposed to be a challenge quilt, and I have a challenging quilt that I want to do. So I actually redrafted the pattern because I didn't want to do it the 14-inch block that it was. I wanted to do a smaller block. And so I redrafted it. And I made this top. So you can see there's the block. I actually did it, and the points actually match, and they actually, at least mostly, not perfectly, but mostly they match, and it goes like it's supposed to, and I was very, very happy about it. And I love the dark colors of this quilt. I just didn't know what to do with it. We got done, and I think I used up pretty much all of my challenge fabric. I used up all or most of this green. So I don't have, most of this red is gone. I didn't have anything else to do to make it bigger, because originally I was thinking I would still do it for our bed. It would just be a different sort of quilt. This is about 60 inches square. 56, something like that. So my other thing is, besides making something out of the original quilt, I want to get this one finished. It has been on my UFO pile since way back then because I didn't know how I wanted to finish it. I don't even consider it one of my UFOs. I have kind of a UFO that I'm actually sure I'm going to work on, and then I have just sitting in limbo pile, and this was my sitting in limbo pile. But I did decide if I'm going to do something with the big blue one, I need to finish this one. So I have flannel picked out for the background, and I'm going to make a quilt, just a snuggle quilt that we will probably have out here around Christmas time because it's definitely wintry colors. So anyway, that's the story of my first quilt, which turned into my 11th quilt to finish. And I have no idea what number quilt this was, but I'm very happy that I was actually able to do that block and to make it done. I called this my Triumph Over Adversity quilt because this gave me a lot of headaches, but I got it done. Anyway, that is the story of the big blue quilt, or how not to make your first quilt. And this is telling you about two more of my UFOs. Obviously, these are very, very old projects. I don't know if I will get to them right away, but at some point, hopefully before too much longer, you'll see me working on them. So thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this story, and we'll catch you later.